As we go through all the quarterback matchups for week 7, along with the tight ends, we need to recognize that history is being made this week. That's right. It's only going to be the second matchup between 40-year-old quarterbacks. Look, we had Breeze and Brady twice before, and now we're getting Aaron Rodgers and Joe Flacco. Are you ready?
No, I am not ready for this.
All right, that might be a little anticlimactic there, but okay. We're going to go through all the quarterbacks, all the tight ends, all the players that matter because we want you to put the right players in your fantasy lineups for week 7. This week, 2 teams are off. Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson will be on your bench because it's the Ravens and the Bills. We still have a couple of must starts at the positions: Jalen Hurts, Jaden Daniels, and welcome back Pat Mahomes. At tight ends, well, Trey McBride, Tyler Warren, and if he plays, George Kittle. And before we get to the first matchup, reminder, we're on our way still to 100K. Appreciate everyone who has subscribed this year. If you're watching this channel and you still haven't hit that subscribe button, what are you waiting for? Help us out. We're trying to help you win in fantasy. And let's get right to it. Steelers-Bengals is the first game of the week. We got those quarterbacks. Look, these are Hall of Famers. I'm not sure they're playing at Hall of Fame level right now, but maybe Aaron Rodgers could interest you against this Bengals defense.
Yeah, I think Aaron Rodgers, barely a streamer this week because it is the Bengals defense. So, there's chances here. And then I'll say Jonnu Smith, again, barely a streamer only because it's the Bengals and they're so bad against tight ends. But this guy only has 7 catches and 47 yards total over the last 3 games. So risky streamers for both of them.
Figure there'll be the random week where Jonnu Smith reemerges. This would be the ideal time because of the matchup, but a risky streamer, to be sure. I feel like, honestly, if you want to go with the narrative side of things, maybe on prime time, these quarterbacks give it their all. I've been saving Aaron Rodgers, has been kind of saving up what he's got left for those games that he feels matters, like when he played the Jets. A game like this, maybe he goes all out, but look, I'm keeping him in the super flex level. Joe Flacco, wasn't bad in his Bengals debut, but come on, he's still not great. I think he can't be more than super flex either.
No, not more than a super flex start here, even against the Steelers. No.
This week we got another game in London. This time it's going to be the Rams at the Jaguars. All right, so let's start with Matthew Stafford. First of all, I knew it, and we should have known, right? And we kept saying it too, Matthew Stafford, it was too good to be true, it was too obvious. So of course he didn't have a good game against Baltimore, but to be fair, I think losing his number 1 receiver, Puka Nacua, for most of the game, it had to hurt him, but look, he might not have Puka for this game either.
Yeah, he might not have Puka for this game, but this is actually a good matchup against the Jags, and you know what's going to happen this week. Now everybody's going to be like, okay, never mind, no more Matthew Stafford. And he's probably going to light the Jags up. But that being said, I can't put him more than a streamer this week.
Yeah, but I do think he's at least a streaming candidate, not just super flex. I think if you need a quarterback, again, don't just pass over Matt Stafford because he let you down. This Jags defense, sure, they're taking the ball away pretty well, but they have allowed an average of over 300 yards passing to quarterbacks for the past 3 weeks. And so even without Puka, he's got Devontae Adams. He's got a live arm still. Stafford could be a streamer. And I mentioned somewhat reluctantly Trevor Lawrence as probably the best streaming candidate. If you're looking for someone who's pretty widely available this week, I think it's a good spot for him.
It is a good spot for him. And look, he's been pretty good as of late, right? Only 4 touchdowns, only 1 interception over the last 3 games. He's looking better. Again, I think Trevor Lawrence, a good streaming option this week.
Yeah, without rehashing everything that was in the waiver video, this Rams defense, the stats are very misleading. They've faced a lot of weak competition at quarterback, so don't worry. Trevor Lawrence is in a good spot, and you could probably pick him up in your league. Now, before we move on, got to remind you that this is a time to try Underdog if you haven't yet. Talked about that Thursday matchup, Jalen Warren at running back. Look, all he needs is to get you a yard, and you win that pick. That's right. They give you a free pick here if you sign up for the first time on Underdog. Use code ENDGAME because when you check out there, you get the gimme pick. You also get a deposit match, and you get $100 in bonus funds added to your account as soon as you play $5 towards any picks. And don't forget, it is boost over, so there's profit boosts every day this month. So we got the Eagles at the Vikings. Yes, still start Jalen Hurts. Now, Dallas Goedert is starting to make a case that maybe you just start him if you have him.
I think that's where we're at. I mean, look, if this guy's going to get designed plays inside the 5-yard line, like touchdown chances, how can you bench him? Like, I think if you got Dallas Goedert, you just start him. You take whatever you get.
Yeah, there comes a point where, like, yeah, they can't keep doing that again, right? They're going to do what they were doing last year. Maybe not, right? This is a different offensive coordinator. Got to keep that in mind. Never a guarantee for touchdowns, but then again, Dallas Goedert is getting the usage that you wish like A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith were getting, so he's got to be a solid option. So for the Vikings, we still got Carson Wentz behind center, and hey, look at that. It's a revenge game against the Eagles, maybe.
Oh man, how many years ago was that? Wow, talk about old quarterbacks here. Carson Wentz, super flex only because they're at home and the Eagles defense is banged up, and then Hawkinson. Again, because the Eagles defense is banged up, I can say barely a streamer, but I don't love it.
Don't love it. I'm nervous. I know probably a couple of weeks now where I've saying like the Eagles are going to play better. They've got to play better, don't they? I mean, come on. Look, so this Eagles defense should show up. Carson Wentz has not looked good. He's been turning the ball over, and so I don't want to bank on second half garbage time stats. I'd rather just sit him, and that means I'm also sitting Hawkinson.
Do you want to get advice from Pierre and myself at the tip of your fingertips? Start, sit, waiver wire, trades, and more? Well, you can do all of this and more on our new app, Draft Lane. We have the ability to view your roster, waivers, and more to give you the right feedback to make the perfect choice. Download Draft Lane from the App Store or Google Play, or use these handy QR codes. And first-time users can use code ENDGAME to get 10 free credits and get your questions answered today.
Now, Patriots at the Titans this week. Well, I think this is legitimately a revenge game for Mike Vrabel, the New England head coach. Patriots are looking good. Drake May is looking good. The Titans are not looking good, which is why they'll have another new head coach, an interim head coach for now. But let's talk about the team that probably matters for fantasy, Drake May and the Pats against this Titans defense.
And you got to feel pretty good here. He's looking good. The Patriots cannot run the football. They need Drake May. I think he's got to be solid this week. And then Hunter Henry, unfortunately, I think has to drop down to the streaming tier because, suddenly they're throwing to wide receivers again.
Hunter Henry, always that volatile streamer. You can play him and, just hope that he scores. Look, the only reason Drake May isn't higher this week against the Titans is the fact that they just might not need to throw the ball that much. So he's been great, super high floor, so he is solid. Cam Ward, Titans, not so much. I don't think even I, the biggest of Cam Ward fans, can think about him. Can you think about Okonkwo? He actually showed up a little bit last week.
I think you can think about Okonkwo because, with Ridley out, we did see his target share bump up a little bit here. So I think you can stream him. The Patriots, not like a tough defense against tight ends, but Cam Ward, new interim coach, I don't think it's going to make a big difference. I'm not starting Cam Ward.
Yeah, I've got to think that Okonkwo here is going to be the beneficiary. Like you said, Ridley out. Pats, for what it's worth, give up the fourth most yards per target to the tight end. And so he could be a decent streamer, but only if you really need one. Now the Panthers at the Jets. Let's start with Bryce Young. He's been efficient. He hasn't really had big games, even against bad defenses and even when they win. I mean, I gotta ask, at any point, is he gonna break through and be more than just like a 2 QB super flex option?
I mean, at this point, it doesn't look like it, and this is not the Cowboys. This is, the Jets look pretty good defensively the last couple of weeks. Just super flex here.
Yeah, if he couldn't put up big numbers passing against the Cowboys, why would he against the Jets? The Jets are bad, but I don't think their defense is really worse against the pass than the Cowboys. Look, Bryce Young, I credit that they've won some games, but hard to believe only once this year has he even gone over 200 passing yards. Forget 300, so super flex only. All right, we just have to get this over with. We have to talk about the Jets passing game. So Justin Fields, maybe he won't be a league winner, but then again, look, it was an overseas game. It was the Broncos defense. They're sticking with him. He still has rushing upside. But come on, can you actually find yourself putting Justin Fields in the fantasy lineup and feeling good about yourself?
Well, you're not going to feel good about it. I was going to say super flex, but now Garrett Wilson probably not going to play. You can't feel good about Justin Fields here. I think you got to sit him. But I do still feel good about Mason Taylor. This is a good matchup for Mason Taylor. This is a bounce back spot. I think Mason Taylor still solid this week.
Yeah, look, so for Fields, no. You cannot risk a guy who just put up the second worst game in terms of EPA per play of the entire season thus far. Only Jake Browning was worse. You can't risk that. I do like Mason Taylor a lot. I know a lot of people like, why? How could you? Look, Garrett Wilson being out makes it even better for him. It was a brutal matchup last week. It was a brutal performance. Everything was brutal there. But Mason Taylor actually could have his best game this season. So don't go crazy, but I think he's a solid start. Next up, it's the Dolphins at the Browns. All right, so when he's not busy throwing interceptions or throwing his teammates under the bus and his head coach, Tua Tagovailoa has put up decent numbers in a couple of weeks, and then last week, not so much. Now he gets to face this Cleveland defense on the road. Where are you at with him?
Yeah, you can't feel too good about Tua this week, that's for sure. Although, look, Aaron Rodgers just threw for 235 yards and 2 touchdowns against them, but the turnovers here on the road against the Browns, this is super flex only. And then Darren Waller, I'll say, even though Darren Waller didn't necessarily have a big game target-wise, I mean, he still scored, and his route participation was very high last week. He's playing more, so I think he's still got to be solid this week. The Browns not that tough against tight ends.
Yeah, I think Waller is definitely still a very high-end streamer. I would feel better about him if I thought they were, going to score more against this defense. Cleveland, it's going to be a tough place. I just don't think it's going to be a high-scoring game as well. So no guarantees for touchdowns. As far as Tua, look, Superflex is okay still. He had started to turn the corner. We thought he had gone a couple straight games without an interception, and then 3 last week. He's now third behind Jake Browning and Geno Smith, most interceptions thrown on the season. This team is just going south in a hurry, so it might not be longer before he's not even Superflex. On the other hand, you have the efficient but boring Dylan Gabriel. How do you break down a performance where he threw it over 50 times and still barely squeezed out like 221 yards?
I mean, you can't feel good. 221 yards on 52 attempts, not a single touchdown. I mean, can you even call it efficient? It's just like, I don't even know what you call this. Only because it's the Dolphins, I can consider him in super flex, but barely. And then I'll say we got to talk about the tight ends here because, look, David Njoku left that game multiple times and finally left to the end and didn't come back. If he's out, I think Harold Fannin has to be a strong start this week, one of your best options. If they both play, I'll say both are streamable because it's the Dolphins.
Yeah, Gabriel, I mean, whatever. Super flex if you really don't have anything better. But agree, Harold Fannin showed up big time. Of course, because of the Njoku injury. Look, Njoku might miss. If so, Fannin's going to be one of your best waiver pickups at tight end, one of your best options, maybe one of the better tight ends overall. All right, gets to face this Dolphins defense. All right, now let's talk Saints at Bears. The Saints, for their part, are at least competitive. They're hanging in there, right? Spencer Rattler, I kind of feel the same. He's just kind of like hanging in there. I almost thought, hey, it's the Bears defense. Maybe we should consider Rattler, but yeah, it's probably just not enough upside here.
Nah, a super flex is fine because it's the Bears, but this guy's only got one game with more than one touchdown all year. Like, what is really the upside here? Super flex only.
For what it's worth, the Bears defense was less worse coming off the bye. So yeah, he is maybe a low-end streamer because you're going to be without Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, and I don't think it's the worst spot for him. But Juwan Johnson, on the other hand, I feel like we can just completely ignore. And then Caleb Williams going back home to face the Saints. Good spot for him. Again, you feel like, he's definitely been better than last year, but we haven't seen that huge leap forward. Do we see something different this week?
Think we could. I mean, you specifically talked about it last week with Drake May, how every quarterback has thrown for at least 2 touchdowns. We probably should have been higher on Drake May last week. I'm not going to make that mistake with Caleb Williams. I mean, he's running. He could run in a touchdown. He's got weapons. I think he's got to be a strong start.
Yeah, and that Saints defense over the past 3 weeks alone have been the worst to quarterbacks in terms of fantasy points per game allowed. We just saw Caleb run in a touchdown. That said, I don't know if there's a massive ceiling here because is this game really going to be a shootout? I think he's on the higher end of the solid tier, though. Now, Raiders taking on the Chiefs. I like, based on the way he's been playing and based on the fact he's getting to play the Raiders at home, if you have Pat Mahomes, you just don't think about it. Start him. You might want to think twice, maybe more than twice, about Geno Smith in your fantasy lineups. And then, is Brock Bowers ever going to come back?
I mean, of course he's going to come back. I know it's always frustrating when these injured players are out, but eventually they come back and everything's fine. So, Geno Smith, nah, on the road, KC, no chance here. Brock Bowers, if he plays and he's healthy and he's fully good to go, I think he's still got to be a strong starter. You really sitting Brock Bowers. And then I'll say, if he sits again, you can stream Michael Mayer. I don't love it because, again, it's on the road against the Chiefs, but hey, he led the team in targets last week.
This is true, which is probably problematic for the offense itself. Look, Geno is a hard no. Got to wonder, honestly, if he's going to hang on to that job much longer. And look, Brock Bowers, I get it. You just want to automatically plug him in there. You might have a better option at some point, that you picked up along the way. Don't know who that is, but I'm just going to say Bowers. I also want to guarantee that he's 100%, and I don't know if we're going to get that even if he's active. So I'll say he's solid, but not an auto start for me. And Michael Mayer, in this matchup at KC, no, I'm going to look elsewhere. And maybe if you have Travis Kelce, you don't need to do that. He's starting to kind of come along as the season is progressing, but here comes Rashee Rice back.
Right, that's the thing here. On the one hand, you feel like, hey, Kelsey's been pretty good lately. Maybe you just got to fire him up now. But how will Rashee Rice affect him? I guess we'll find out. But at the same time, like I said, Kelsey's been good. I don't think I can bench Kelce. I'm going to say solid this week. We'll see if I feel the same way next week.
Right, but look, it's the Raiders defense. Not much to worry about here. If you have Kelce, you probably don't need to look anywhere else. You can just keep him in there. In this Colts-Chargers matchup, well, if you do have Tyler Warren at tight end, you definitely don't need to look anywhere else. He is a must-start now. Just set and forget. Daniel Jones, look, he's had a great season. He's not there yet. On the road against the Bolts, how are you feeling?
You can't feel great. He's been good this year, but he's only thrown for 2 touchdowns twice all season. He could always run for a touchdown. I feel like he hasn't been as good as it feels like he's been for fantasy, but he's still been solid. But I'm a little nervous in this matchup on the road against the Chargers. I'm going to say high-end streamer this week.
I'm going to go just a little higher. I think he should be solid. I have a feeling that we're seeing the Chargers partly out of necessity because of their injuries. They're going to get back to what they did last year, is try to stop the run on defense and try to establish the run even with their injuries on offense. I think they're going to try to make Danny Dimes beat them, in other words, and I think he'll be good enough. The volume should be there. He's got rushing upside, so I think he's solid. And Justin Herbert last week didn't have too tough a time against the Dolphins, even with all those injuries. So how do you feel about him in this matchup? And now we got to talk Oronde Gadsden, the rookie here. He's coming on.
He's coming on, but I do wonder if QJ plays this week, how is that going to affect him? So I'm just going to say a streamer right now against the Colts. Colts is kind of middle of the pack versus tight ends. Look, last week it was a nice bounce back spot for Justin Herbert against the Dolphins as expected. Colts, much stiffer defense than the Dolphins here, so I'm just going to say solid at home this week.
Yeah, I feel like this game is going to be competitive, but not necessarily a shootout. So Herbert is solid, right? He gives you a pretty good floor at QB. And then with Gadsden, I will say this, he's definitely a streaming candidate, and he's hiding getting that kind of targets. He's athletic. Got to keep in mind last week, first of all, QJ was out. It was Miami. That's where his dad plays, the homecoming and all this stuff. They've had all sorts of injuries. If QJ comes back, he's still a streamer, though, because the interesting thing is that Will Dissly, their veteran tight end, had been out for a couple of weeks. Well, he came back last week, and still Gadsden ran the most routes and was out there for the most snaps. So it seems like he's kind of become the guy at tight end. All right, now we got to talk Giants at Broncos. It's funny because, one of these teams is 2-4, the other's 4-2. And after last week, you'd think it was switched. Everyone's going crazy about Jackson Dart and the Giants. The Broncos didn't look very good in barely beating the Jets. Let's be realistic here. Jackson Dart, he's fun to watch, but how fun is he going to be in your fantasy lineup?
Probably not very fun this week on the road against the Broncos. Yeah, this is a step. I mean, this is almost as tough as it gets. It might even be as tough as it gets, honestly, defensively. Super flex only because of that rushing potential.
He definitely gives you the rushing upside. Get it, but let's keep in mind here that he threw for less than 200 yards and just 1 touchdown last week. There is a cap here. So super flex, fine. Don't go crazy, right? Look at the numbers. Now looking at Bo Nix and his numbers, you just can't feel great here. I mean, does he do any better this week?
I think he will. He's back at home. Giants defense is good, but it doesn't necessarily scare me. I think Bo Nix is going to be solid this week. And then Evan Ingram, I know he's had like 2 nice games in a row, but I'm going to keep him in the streaming tier because unlike last week where, the Jets, Sauce Gardner was kind of able to take out Cortland Sutton, Giants aren't going to be able to do that this week. So Evan Ingram, just a streamer.
Well, I'm still worried about Bo Nix. I mean, look, he should be better than last week, but how much better? He just hasn't put up big games. I don't know that they're going to be forced to pass enough. I'll say he's a low-end streamer for me. Evan Ingram I do feel better about, but also still just a streamer. Packers at the Cardinals this week. All right, Trey McBride, regardless of quarterback, he is a must start. Now, as far as the Packers offense go, okay, Jordan Love continues to be solid. I mean, I feel like that's just the word that kind of embodies Jordan Love in fantasy these days. Tucker Kraft, I mean, I don't know, kind of the same thing for me.
Yeah, I mean, he scored against the Bengals last week, but man, his targets per route run dropped. I mean, he was even below Luke Musgrave last week. Not sure what's going on here. I'm going to say solid for Tucker Kraft, though. The Cardinals do run the most cover 4 of any team, and right now he leads the Packers in targets per route run and yards per route run versus cover 4, so maybe it's a Kraft week. And then I'm going to say Jordan Love, like you said, solid. Like, I feel like Jordan Love, though, is one of these guys, like, he's better in real life than in fantasy. Like, he didn't go nuts against the Bengals last week, but it's not a tough matchup here. He's solid.
So you took the words out of my mouth. He's a good quarterback. He's playing really well in real life. But as long as Josh Jacobs is there, I mean, there's definitely a cap on this passing game and what it's going to do. And this is not a smash spot like it was with the Bengals last week. So, again, solid. Now, last week, Kyler Murray missed, and it sounded like there's a good chance he's going to miss again. But if he comes back, what do you do? And if he doesn't, we're thinking about Jacoby Brissett.
Well, I'll start with Kyler Murray. I think if he comes back, super flex, and that's it. But you got to be worried, like with a foot injury, is he even going to run? How much is he going to run? So barely super flex here. And then same thing with Jacoby Brissett. I mean, this is the Packers. I'm not going to chase that 300-yard game from last week. Barely super flex for both these guys, only for desperate.
Yeah, I had plenty of concerns about Kyler even before the foot injury. So yeah, barely super flex, and Brissett, exactly. This is not a good matchup for him. And even if he puts up a decent amount of yardage, again, what is his true upside? Next up, we got the Commanders at the Cowboys. Some people have been asking, like, if you have Jaden Daniels, you keep him in your lineup. He gets the Cowboys this week, especially. All right, what about Zach Ertz? He did find the end zone last week.
Yeah, Zach Ertz. I mean, the Cowboys have been tough against tight ends, but I don't even think it matters at this point. Like, maybe Terry's back. Whatever. This guy's just pretty much solid every week. I feel like he's one of these tight ends. You got him. You just put him in your lineup. You take whatever you get.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, he's been pretty solid, but I'll say he's more just high-end streamer for me because it's true. I mean, we haven't had Terry. What if he plays? Debo wasn't 100%. All these variables. So he's a good streamer. And the Cowboys, look, they've just been great offensively, especially the passing game. This Commanders defense probably is not going to scare you away from either Dak or Ferg.
No, I think Dak has to be a strong start this week. You just got to keep rolling with him. I will say Ferguson's interesting here because if CeeDee Lamb plays, you got to think that's going to hurt his target share a little bit. But still, he's been so good. Can you really sit Jake Ferguson? Probably not. So I'm going to keep him in the strong tier, but I'll be a little nervous if CD plays.
Yeah, I mean, it's fair to be a little worried about that target share, but I mean, still, as far as the tight end landscape goes, how many tight ends would you really want to play over Ferguson? I think he's a strong start regardless. And, of course, after last year where he didn't score at all, he just can't stop scoring touchdowns now. Falcons at the Niners. Here's hoping George Kittle makes an appearance. If so, you're going to play him. All right, now let's look at the Falcons offense here. pretty impressive performance beating Buffalo in Week 6. Now they're on the road, though, against San Francisco. Thoughts on Michael Penix Jr. and Kyle Pitts?
Well, I'll start with Michael Penix Jr. I know the 49ers defense is, no Fred Warner, no Nick Bosa, decimated right now, but I just feel like when are we going to see it, right? When are we going to see Michael Penix Jr. say, hey, I am like a QB, a QB you can feel good about every week in fantasy. Like, it looks like it's going to happen, and then it stops. Like in that game, he looked great in the first half and then did nothing in the second half. So I'm just going to say super flex here. And I know Pitts did not really do anything in that game last week. It was all Drake London. But with Fred Warner out, I feel like this could be a sneaky good Pitts game. I'm going to say solid, but like risky solid.
Yeah, Warner out, but also Mooney out again. And there's just no depth there for the Falcons receivers. So you figure Pitts would get more involved. 49ers usually shut down tight ends, but Warner was the reason, and he's gone. So I think he's a good streamer, but I still have some trust issues. As far as Penix, like you said, this is a team that still runs the ball a lot, and they should, because they have one of the best running backs in the game in Bijan. So just don't know if the ceiling's going to be there. Is this really going to turn into a shootout? Not quite so sure. So super flex is as high as I can go. And then for 49ers, as far as QBs go, maybe it's Purdy, maybe it's still Mac Jones. Either way, honestly, doesn't matter.
I don't know if it matters because, if it's Purdy, how healthy is he really? If it's Mac Jones, what are we going to get? I think they're both just streaming options this week. And then I'll say if we don't get George Kittle again, let's hope we get George Kittle, please, this week. Hey, you can fire up Jake Tonjes as a streamer if you need to.
Yeah, I think you've got to feel pretty good about Tonjes at this point if Kittle is still out. He's been a top 12 tight end now for a couple of weeks in a row. He's getting targeted. Of course, we never know who's actually going to play for the 49ers at receiver or anywhere, so let's just say they're all streaming possibilities. And in the first of 2 Monday night games, we're going to have the Buccaneers taking on the Lions in Detroit. All right, so we know we keep saying Baker Mayfield, it doesn't matter who's out there, but at some point, he needs a healthy wide receiver to throw to, right? Who isn't a guy that just came off the practice squad. So we know Ibuka's out, Godwin's out, Bucky is out, maybe Mike Evans comes back. How much of a factor is this going to have to be for Baker this week?
Is it even a factor? He only had Ibuka for a little over a quarter last week, and it didn't seem to matter. It doesn't seem to matter. This game could be a shootout. I think, can't say strong start this week because, again, what if Evans doesn't play? He doesn't really have a lot of options here, but I'll say solid. And then I will say Cade Otton with Ibuka out, with Godwin out. If Evans is out, you can at least feel good about him as a streaming tight end.
Yeah, that's right. Cade Otton has to be on the radar now. So, yeah, if Evans is out, feel pretty good about Cade Otton. Not going to go crazy, but I wouldn't feel quite so good about Baker Mayfield. Again, not saying he's unstartable, but I would drop him down, to where all those other streaming options are. I might like somebody else better. If Evans plays, then I would say then he's at least solid. And then the Lions now back at home against a softer pass defense. Sounds like it's time to fire up both Goff and or Laporta.
Yeah, I think you got to feel good about both these guys. Like Laporta, 2 strong games in a row. Got to be a strong start here. And Goff at home against the Bucs. Yeah, definitely a strong start.
Right. You just got to hope that the Bucs are at least able to put up enough points to make this a shootout. Shootout does still seem pretty likely, though. Not sure if we're going to get a ton of points in the final game of the week. It's going to be the Texans at the Seahawks. These defenses have been pretty good. All right, well, let's start with C.J. Stroud. He was coming off a nice week before the bye. And then Dalton Schultz is the tight end.
Yeah, C.J. Stroud this week, I know he had a nice week before the bye. That was the Ravens. This is a tough defense. Barely super flex here. Maybe even a sit, depending on your options. And then I'll say Dalton Schultz, you can stream him. I don't love it, but one thing Seattle does, they kind of funnel everything short into the middle, so it could benefit him.
Yeah, this matchup favors a guy like Schultz, but exactly how many targets do you think he's going to get? What's the real upside? He's not scoring touchdowns, so he's a streamer for a floor. And then, like you said, CJ Stroud is just kind of barely an option in a 2 QB league. Now, Sam Darnold has been really good, pretty consistently good all season, but this might be his toughest matchup yet.
Yeah, it probably is, but he's at least at home, and he's been so good. I still have a hard time benching him. I'm going to say solid, but very low end of the solid, so like right on the border of streamer and solid. And then like AJ Barner, okay, 1 week wonder here, right? Like the touchdown or bust here, not doing it.
No, not doing with Barner. I kind of don't really want to do it with Darnold. I know he's been better than I expected, but this Houston defense, like I said, they haven't given up a passing touchdown to a quarterback for the past 3 games. They've only given up 3 passing touchdowns all season. This is a legit defense. I'm worried enough, I'll say he's only a super flex option. Now you know where to find everything you need to win in week 7. Start sit at every position. It's in the playlist.